In 1855, a group of Russian archaeologists set off for Siberia, to the hard-to-reach mountain region of Altai. According to local residents, in one of the highland plateaus, there was an ancient sanctuary or burial site, about which legends were passed down from generation to generation. Great hopes were associated with the expedition. It was believed that unique artifacts of ancient tribes that inhabited Altai, long before the arrival of Russian settlers, could have been preserved there. After several months of difficult excavations, the archaeologists actually managed to discover something amazing. Several presumably 8 large wooden sarcophagi, as well as various household items, weapons, jewelry, and clothing items. All the finds were tentatively dated to the century BC. The archaeologists were especially amazed by the size of the tombs. The length of some sarcophagi reached 5 and 5 meters, which cast doubt on their belonging to ordinary people. The question of who or what rested in these coffins became the main secret of that expedition. All the objects and the sarcophagi themselves were soon taken to St. Petersburg, to the Imperial Academy of Sciences, where the best scientists in the country joined the case for several years. A detailed study of the finds was conducted. However, surprisingly, nothing more was reported about the continuation of the work, publications, or new expeditions. The project was seemingly frozen, and for a decade, information about the Siberian excavations disappeared from the public domain. Curious researchers and journalists of that time did not give up trying to find out what exactly the archaeologists had discovered in Siberia. Some of them tried to find mentions in academic reports or get comments from expedition participants, but were met with silence. Officially, the era of the triumph of Darwinism began in scientific circles, and the hypothesis of the existence of prehistoric giants turned out to be not only marginal but also directly contradictory to new scientific doctrines. Therefore, even those who were involved in the Altai find tried to speak about it as carefully as possible, if they spoke at all. However, several eyewitnesses and participants of that expedition later mentioned in their memoirs and oral stories that the sarcophagus were so large that they could accommodate a person over 4 meters tall. Then, in the middle of the 19th century, rumors began to circulate in the Russian Empire, for the first time, that academic science was allegedly hiding the truth about the Siberian giants. This gave rise to the first wave of conspiracy theories about the deliberate concealment of historical truth. Of course, such statements cannot be considered full-fledged evidence of the existence of giants in ancient times. However, a reasonable question arises. If ordinary human mummies were inside the huge sarcophagi, why were they not put on public display in one of the empire's museums, as was customary in that era? As a result, the story of the mysterious Altai expedition of 1855 gradually sank into oblivion. Nobody remembered the sarcophagus longer than 5 meters. Their mysterious contents are the unknown inscriptions found on the outer casing of the coffins. All that remained were faceless mentions in old reports, and fragments of ceramics, weapons, and utensils, which are now stored in museum collections, without any sensational notes. They surprise no one and do not raise questions. Ordinary artifacts of the Siberian region, as modern museum workers believe. However, those few independent researchers who tried to restore the chronology of events and find references to this expedition in the archives claimed that the sarcophagi were indeed unusual. On their surface, there were inscriptions written in an unknown language, not similar to either the ancient Turkic and runic symbols or the writings of Indo-European roots. This indicates that the discovered creatures not only had physical parameters that went beyond the usual human height, but also had their own, albeit lost, culture with language and burial traditions. Legends about giants are found among many peoples of the world, from the Sumerians to the Mayan Indians, from the Celts to the Eskimos. However, evidence that can be attributed to more reliable, they are rare to mythological folklore. And that is why each such episode, recorded by travelers or chroniclers, is valuable in itself. Of particular interest are the stories about the Urals, in Siberia regions, where legends have circulated since ancient times, about people from Polinsky Rost, who allegedly inhabited mountain valleys, caves and taiga. What is especially important is that we are not talking about isolated cases of genetic gigantism, of which there are enough today. No, ancient reports speak of entire tribes of giant people, who were distinguished not only by their tall stature, but also by powerful physical strength, endurance and unusual customs. One of the first documentary evidences of the so-called Russian giants is the report of Ahmed ibn Fadl, an Muslim traveler, theologian and diplomat, who arrived in the territory of Volga, Bulgaria, in 922 as part of the embassy of the Baghdad Caliph. Having passed through the vast lands of Rus, he left behind a unique work of Risala, in which he described in detail the life, customs and appearance of the peoples who inhabited these lands before baptism. The passage from his book that interests us, oddly enough, is often omitted from academic publications, and is simply ignored in popular ones. The Risala of Ibn Fadlan, the famous traveler, theologian and diplomat of the Baghdad Caliphate, tells of a certain Paulina, a man of truly gigantic stature and terrifying appearance, whom the Arab scholar did not personally meet, but heard reliable evidence about him. In the capital of Volga, Bulgaria, while still in Baghdad, he heard from a captive Turk that a giant was being held captive at the court of the Bulgarian king, a man from the distant northern lands, possessing inhuman size, strength and an extremely violent temper. This Turk claimed that the giant was kept on a chain as a dangerous creature, causing horror in everyone who encountered him. When the embassy of the Caliphate arrived in the Bulgarian capital, Ibn Fadlan asked the ruler to show him this unusual captive. But as it turned out, by that time, the giant was already dead. According to eyewitnesses, he was killed shortly before the arrival of the Arab delegation. Neither the guards nor the locals could stand his aggressive behavior. They said that just one look from the giant was enough for an unprepared person to catch his breath. In horror, and pregnant women, at the sight of him, lost consciousness, or even began to give birth prematurely. Such was the terrifying appearance of the northern monster. The giant himself, as they said, was caught far beyond the borders of the Bulgar lands, in the country of Visu, which according to modern researchers may be connected with the Annalistic region of Vas, located in the area of modern Bukhara. There, in a harsh and sparsely populated area, they managed to find the giant, who was then delivered in chains to the Bulgar capital. He was chained to a powerful tree outside the city limits, where he lived alone, like an animal. He died there. When Ibn Fadlan was shown his remains, he was shocked. He wrote in a drawing, "And I saw that his head was like a large roller, and his ribs were like dried branches of the oldest fruit trees. His elbows, hands, the length of his arms, everything inspired amazement and awe. I could not look away for a long time, and only after prayer did I move away in thought." Interestingly, archaeological finds from the end of the 15th century confirm such stories. During the excavation of one of the burial mounds in the Saratov province, south of the places where Ibn Fadlan traveled, human skeletons were discovered, whose proportions were beyond the limits of normal growth. Judging by the bones, these people were over 2.5 meters tall in life. And by the massiveness of the skeleton, they could resemble modern descriptions of heroes or mythological giants. But the most curious thing is that such evidence is not isolated. Another Arab scholar, Abu Hamid al-Garnati, a theologian traveler, and a subtle connoisseur of peoples and customs. More than a century after Ibn Fadlan's journey, an embassy reappeared in Volga, Bulgaria, and one of its participants also left a detailed account of an encounter with a living giant. This story dates back to the year 530 AH, 1135 to 1136 CE. The narrator wrote, "I saw in Bulgaria a tall man, who was said to be descended from the Adits and Samads, ancient tribes destroyed by the wrath of Allah. His name was Danki. He was so big and strong that he could lift a full-grown horse under his arm, as if it were a game, like an ordinary person lifting a lamb. His power was such that he could break a horse's shin with his hand and tear the meat and tendon with the same ease with which others tear greenery. He was not just a giant but also a warrior, capable of causing terror on the battlefield. The ruler of the Bulgars ordered a special chainmail to be forged for him, which could only be transported on a cart. So heavy and massive was it. And the helmet, made for his gigantic head, resembled a cauldron. During battles the giant fought not with a sword, but with a huge club carved from a whole oak trunk. According to eyewitnesses, this club was so massive that if he had hit even an elephant with it, it would have fallen dead. Despite his terrifying size and strength, the giant behaved respectfully with the guests. The author of the memoirs writes, "When he approached me, I felt like a child next to an adult. My head barely reached his waist. He spoke to me in a soft voice and expressed respect. May Allah have mercy on him." Similar accounts of encounters with giants have been preserved in Scandinavian sources. They concern the raids of the Vikings, the thieves into the regions of northern Rus. These northern seafarers, accustomed to harsh conditions and dangers, more than once encountered tribes of tall and, according to them, not quite ordinary creatures on unknown shores. Some chronicles mentioned tribes inhabited exclusively by women, tall, warlike, and well-armed like Amazons. During one of these expeditions, the thieves sailing along the northern coast discovered a strange structure. It was a huge house, or temple, standing alone on the shore. Its walls sparkled as if they were made of white gold, and inlaid with precious stones. It shone so brightly that it did not even cast a shadow. Inside, in the center of the hall, there was a huge table, befitting a king or a great khanum. The table was covered with rich fabrics, and set with many gold and precious vessels, skillfully crafted and incredibly beautiful. At a long table, decorated with unusual patterns and golden vessels, 30 giants were sitting among them. One figure stood out, a priestess. The creature, according to eyewitnesses, was of such a terrifying appearance that her appearance was impossible to convey in words. Her features were so inhuman that even seasoned Vikings, accustomed to battles and the severity of the northern lands, shuddered with disgust and fear. In those moments, everything that was happening seemed like some kind of witchcraft ritual, and the scene itself resembled a myth about the ancient world of titans and gods. Centuries later, a similar story was described in his chronicle by the famous Danish historian and chronicler of the 10th century, Saxo Grammaticus. His chronicles tell how a detachment of Vikings, sailing along the White Sea, came across not a temple, but a cave hidden in the rocks. Giants lived inside. According to the description, in the depths of this low, guttural voices and steps that made the earth tremble were heard from the cave. The warriors did not dare to go further and, seized with superstitious horror, left the shore. The Russian North has long been famous for such stories. Even at the beginning of the 20th century, an old legend was common among the Pom, who went out to hunt for the new land. According to it, in one of the coastal caves strewn with ice and stones, lay a giant human skull. Its size was so great that the palm of an adult man could easily fit inside the eye socket. Local fishermen avoided this place, considering it cursed. Tales of encounters with giants were collected and recorded by the world-famous Soviet archaeologist Alexei Pavlovich Okladnikov, 1908 to 1981, who devoted his life to studying Siberia and the North. One of the stories was told to him by the hunter and reindeer herder Nikolai Korolov from the Lena River. He said that one day a certain hunter named Okov found himself on the coast of the Arctic Ocean, in winter, in the area of Mys Pistovogo. To his amazement, he discovered huge human footprints in the morning snow, which seemed to emerge from nothingness, right out of the ocean waves. The hunter, unafraid, decided to find out where these footprints led. He followed them for several days, overcoming snowy plains, copses, and windblown ravines. Soon a mountain rose in front of him, towering in the taiga, like an island in the middle of the sea. At its foot the footprints not only continued, but there were many of them. Suddenly a woman several fathoms tall, a real Polinch, appeared out of the fog. Her appearance was both majestic and frightening. Her steps echoed loudly across the snowy plain, and her hair fluttered behind her like smoke. She approached the hunter, as if emerging from the world of ancient legends, and silently took Nikolai's hand. Her palm covered his hand completely, like a bear's paw covers a bird's egg. The woman led him through the thick, snow-covered towards the rocks. There, as if it had appeared out of thin air, stood a house. A giant man, even more impressive in size, was already waiting for them at its threshold. His face was stern but not angry. His deep voice seemed to roll like thunder along the inner walls of the dwelling. "Hunter," he said, "you have gone too far. Go home. Just remember, no one, do you hear? Don't tell anyone about what you saw, and I will help you get back. But don't go out yet, I need to prepare the sled. You will go out when I say so." Nikolai fixed it up. Everything inside was huge, from the furniture to the dishes, as if he had found himself in the house of fairy tale titans. After a while, the giant reappeared and, nodding reservedly, said, "Now come out." When Nikolai came out, there was a thick, milky white fog around, through which it was impossible to even see your own palm. Out of nowhere appeared Sled. The giant sat the hunter down and covered him with a warm skin. But then Nikolai noticed something strange. The team was not driven by dogs as usual, but by two giant wolves with silver backs and yellow, glowing eyes. They set off silently, sliding over the snow so softly and quickly that it seemed they did not touch the ground. Another sled loaded to capacity was racing behind. And to the hunter's amazement, it was his own, the very one he had left by the shore many days ago. When Nikolai returned to his hut, he released the wolves, and they immediately disappeared into thin air, as if they had never existed. Left alone, he finally looked into his team and saw it. There lay a mountain of choice furs, sable Arctic foxes, white and blue foxes, wealth that would be enough for a comfortable life, not only for him but also for his children. So according to legend, the giant took pity on a man who had accidentally wandered into his domain, and rewarded him for his modesty and silence. Nikolai Korolov really kept this secret all his life. Only in old age, feeling the end approaching, did he tell this story to archaeologist Alexei Okladnikov, not as a fantasy, but as a testament. And as he left, he repeated, "We people do not know everything about the land. We walk on